Hello, children. Today we are going to learn a new prose lesson, The Night the Ghost Gotten, written by James Thurber. Presented by A. Philomen Bala, Lecturer, Diet, Thoothukudi. Reviewed by Dr. P. Goldagrena Rajati, Principal, Diet, Thoothukudi. First, let's know something about the author. James Grover Thurber was born on December 8, 1894 and left the world on November 2, 1961. He was an American cartoonist, author, humorist, journalist, playwright, children's book author, and celebrated wit. James Thurber was one of the most popular humorists of his time. His cartoons and short stories were published mainly in the New Yorker magazine. The Catbird Seat, written by James Thurber, was published on November 7, 1942 in the New Yorker magazine. His notable works are My Life and Hard Times and My World and Welcome to It. Children, now let's see an introduction to this lesson. The Night the Ghost Gotten is a short story by James Thurber written as a fictionalized account of a night he remembers as a child. Misunderstanding about footsteps in the kitchen turned into great confusion. The story was published in the New Yorker in 1933 under the title My Life and the Hard Times 4, The Night the Ghost Gotten. The story begins with a short introductory paragraph that prepares readers for the more colorful events that will unfold in the pages to come. His mother throwing a shoe through a window, his grandfather shooting a policeman, and then goes right into the events of that night. Before entering into the story, let us learn the new words first. Hullabaloo, a loud noise made by people who are angry or annoyed. For example, there was a lot of hullabaloo over his controversial statements. Burglar, a person who illegally enters buildings and steals things. For example, the burglar got into the house through the bedroom window. Attic, the space or room at the top of a building under the roof, often used for storing things. For example, there are old chairs and guitar kept in the attic. Despondent, feeling or showing extreme discouragement. For example, Richard and Albert are feeling sad and despondent. Gripped, to hold very tightly. For example, the baby gripped her father's finger with a tiny hand. Slam, to cause or to move against a hard surface with a force and usually a loud noise. For example, out of her anger, she slammed the door. Venture, to risk going somewhere or doing something that might be dangerous or unpleasant. For example, though she heard the voice of the burglar, she ventured out of her room. Gruff, rough and low in pitch. For example, I'm not a fool, she said gruffly. Intuitive, based on feelings rather than facts or proof. For example, she intuitively brings her arms to cover her nose while sneezing. Wham, to strike or cause to strike with great force. For example, she picked a sandal and whammed it on him. Engraver, a person who cuts designs or words on metal, glass, or wood. For example, this engraver has engraved my name on the ring for free. Froth, to be extremely angry. For example, he was frothing and shouting out of his anger and humiliation. Petrol wagon, a closed police vehicle used for transporting prisoners. For example, the criminal was arrested and taken to the police station in the petrol wagon. Hoarse, having a rough voice, often because of a sore throat or a cold. For example, "Yes," he said in a hoarse voice. Tramp, to walk heavily and noisily. For example, he is tromping over the grass, never minding the arrows. Yank, to pull something forcefully with a quick movement. For example, the woman tried to yank the man's candy box from his hand. Ransack, to search a place or container in a violent and careless way. For example, the burglars ransacked her home. Zither, a musical instrument shaped like a flat box. For example, the man is playing the zither. Strum, to move your fingers across the strings of a guitar or similar instrument. For example, she is sitting in the bedroom strumming a guitar. Guinea pig, a small animal covered in fur with rounded ears, short legs, and no tail, often kept as a pet by children. For example, the baby is playing with guinea pigs. Hysterical, very funny. For example, his hysterical laughter made everybody stunned. Sprawl, to lie or sit with arms and legs spread out. For example, the child is sprawling on the ground and crying. Holster, a small case usually made of leather and fixed on a belt or a strap used for carrying a gun. For example, he keeps the gun in the holster. Rafter, any of the large sloping pieces of wood that support a roof. For example, the ceilings have the representation of wooden beams and rafters. Deserter, a person who leaves the armed forces without permission. For example, he says, "I'm not a deserter." Reluctant, not willing to do something and therefore slow to do it. For example, it was a reluctant farewell to him. Phony, to describe anything that's fake. For example, she holds a phony smile. Blasphemy, to use offensive words or make statements that show no respect for God or religion. For example, the man is cursing and blaspheming. Children, now let's see the summary of the story. It starts with the narrator, James Thurber, coming out of a bath at 1:15 in the morning and hearing a noise downstairs in the dining room. It sounds to him like footsteps, like someone walking quickly around the dining room table. He assumes that it is his father or older brother just home from a trip, but after a few minutes have passed and the walking has not stopped, he goes to wake his brother Herman. Wakened suddenly, Herman is frightened when he is told that there is someone downstairs, although the story never does indicate whether he hears the same sound the narrator does. He goes back to bed, slamming the door. The noise downstairs is gone, and Thurber explains none of us ever heard the ghost again. However, the slamming door brings their mother out into the hall. The mother asks about all of the footsteps she has heard and then comes to the conclusion that there are burglars downstairs. Because the telephone is downstairs where she thinks the burglars are, she devises a scheme to contact the police. She throws a shoe through the window of the house next door, which is close to the Thurber house, waking Mr. and Mrs. Bodwell, who live there. At first, Mr. Bordwell thinks that she is telling him that there are burglars in his own house, but after a momentary confusion, he calls the police and tells them to go to the Thurber house. The arrival of the police blows the whole event out of proportion. Their group includes a fourth sedan full of them, 2 on motorcycles, and a petrol wagon with about 8 of them in it and a few reporters. They call out for the front door to be opened, and when no one in the house goes downstairs, they break it in. They go upstairs to find the narrator still not dressed after his bath, and the mother insisting that there were burglars in the house, even though all of the doors and windows are bolted from the inside. To justify their trip, the police set about searching the house, moving furniture and emptying closets. At one point, a policeman's curiosity gets the best of him, and he points out an unusual old musical instrument, a zither, to another officer. The narrator adds to the confusion by adding the useless information that the family's old guinea pig used to sleep on the zither. The police are suspicious of the strange family. The mother was hysterical, and when the narrator's grandfather, who sleeps in the attic, makes a slight noise, the policemen spring into action. They race upstairs to investigate. The narrator knows that this will lead to trouble because his grandfather is going through a phase in which he thinks that the Civil War is still going on. When the policemen arrive at his door, he is convinced that they are Meade's army. He calls them cowards and tells them to go back to the battle. He slaps one of the policemen across the back of the head, sending him to the floor, and as the others leave their fallen comrade and run away, he takes the man's gun from his holster and shoots at him, hitting him in the shoulder. He fires twice more and then goes back to bed. Back downstairs, the police are upset that there is nobody to arrest, but they are not willing to go back to the attic and risk being shot at again. The wounded officer's shoulder is bandaged, and they start looking around the house again. A reporter approaches the narrator, who has not been able to find one of his own shirts and is instead wearing one of his mother's blouses. When the reporter asks what all of the commotion is about, the narrator answers in all sincerity that the problem is that they have had ghosts in the house. The reporter thinks about that for a while and then just walks away quietly. The policeman who has been shot declares his intention to go up to the attic and get his pistol back, but the other officers just mock him. The narrator promises to get the gun from his grandfather in the morning and bring it down to the police station. When the narrator's mother is told that grandfather shot a policeman, the only reason she is disturbed is that the officer is such a nice-looking young man. The next morning, the grandfather comes down to breakfast looking cheerful. Nothing is said about the commotion of the night before, and the family assumes that he has forgotten it until he asks, "What was the idea of all them cops tarry-hooting round the house last night?" Thurber does not say when the grandfather realized that it was policemen, not soldiers, in his room, but the fact that he understands reality is accepted as a sign that all is fine in the house, and the story ends on that light-hearted note. Bertrand Russell, in his unpopular essays, says, "Fear is the main source of superstition and one of the main sources of cruelty. To conquer fear is the beginning of wisdom." Finally, I'd like to conclude with a quote of Nelson Mandela: "The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." Children, never afraid of anything. Be bold and stay strong. Meet you in the next video. Bye. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel. Together we can move forward.